Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and I have Greg Bogart back with me today. Hello, Greg.
Hi there, Anna.
Well, you have written this lovely book, and it is called Astrology as a Therapeutic Art. So I think it's absolutely just the kind of thing that I'm interested in, given that I'm also a psychological astrologer like you. And I maybe it might be good to explore how you use astrology in your practice as a psychotherapist.
As a marriage and family therapist, I'm very interested in helping people enhance their relationships, feel more excited about their relationships with all their family members and beloveds. And astrology provides a unique lens on the challenges, the difficult phases of relationships. And what I focus on in this book is focused on healing human relationships. This is really the third book in a series of books on therapeutic application of astrology. And what I'm showing in this book is not so much about chart comparison, but about trying to help people understand, the transits to their own chart that are causing some issues interpersonally, but also to understand what's going on for their family members, their spouses, their boss, whatever, to understand different stress points in the relational field. And I use the astrological map in a process-oriented way. I mean, sure, all astrologers predict and use progressions and transits to look ahead, but more with the goal of anticipation of developmental stages, tasks, so that there's an active involvement in unfolding what happens with the planetary influences. So in that respect, it's therapeutic. It's saying that we can improve our situation if we act in accordance, in alignment with the planetary tides that we are experiencing, and that this enhances our functioning, enhances our interactions with others, and improves our lives.
I find myself, I I completely resonate with what you're saying, because one of the most wonderful things about astrology is that it allows people to have a glimpse of what it's like to be someone else. So whether it's my students or my clients, when they're wanting to have that understanding of the other person, and they start looking at what it means to be a Gemini, or to have the moon in Scorpio, or whatever it might be, it's so wonderful, because I often see the penny drop, and they go, oh, okay, that's why. So beyond looking at Sinistry, which is really about the chemistry that exists between people, having that insight into what makes another person tick is so profound, that it really does change relationships. I've often heard people say, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to try to find a different way of communicating, or maybe I'm not going, maybe I don't have to put so much pressure on this person for to do things in this way,
To be
because I
like me.
yeah, to be like me, exactly, because I can now see that their brain is wired differently to mine. It's such a profound thing.
Yes, there's nothing against Sinistry. I'm way into Sinistry, but the idea is trying to understand how I'm organized and how this other person is put together, how they are organized in the celestial perspective, and adapt. And the Huna say to love is to be happy with. So how can I learn to be happy with others as they are? That's profound.
Exactly, because if you have let's say somebody who's got a very strong Virgo, but they're dealing with somebody who has Mercury and Gemini, with the best will in the world, they are expecting that Mercury and Gemini to pay attention to detail in a way that they're never going to be able to do to do. So, you know, um, so I think that's it's very, very helpful. Tell us about the role of crisis in healing.
Oh, sure. Well, in crisis, events come to a pitch and something that needs to happen unfolds, and we have to change. We have to realize we're in a different time. The astrology does not sugarcoat reality. Sometimes we have Pluto transits that bring crisis, that bring endings, that bring, an opportunity for closure, hopefully. But sometimes we have to encounter the worst in other people or in ourselves. We have to deal with the shadow and make amends, for our own actions. And so crisis, we would like everything to be stable and saturnine and predictable. Actually, some people would not like that, but there's a value in the saturnine structures of life having consistency, continuity. But then the outer planets often disrupt that. They urge us to change. So the crisis is often a prod to make a change of direction. And astrology is valuable in helping us find the meaning of crisis, what is asked of us, why it needs to happen, and what the nature of our resistance is to that change. So astrology is a valuable tool for navigating crisis situations, job changes, relationship changes, financial changes, housing changes, health changes, and making adjustments to that. Um, I've been teaching college classes for 30 years, and I'm having a Pluto transit right now, and I've been furloughed for the next 7 months. But what's happening is I'm teaching a lot more astrology. And that's something that has been more, it's not exactly been on the back burner, but I'm doing more of it now that I don't have this other obligation. So the the beauty of astrology is in showing the meaning of a crisis situation, how Uranus wants us to try something different, not to follow the same paths all the time, how Neptune forces us to let go, to trust, to flow, to yield, to go with it when a situation is beyond our control. So astrology helps us understand crisis in relationships by understanding what is happening to our partner's chart. And maybe we have a lot going on in our 12th house, and the partner is at work all the time or is having stress in the workplace. The 12th house is the 6th house from the spouse 7th house. So we can understand, why I'm spending all this time alone? My partner is away all the time at work. But we realize that's okay. It's not like we're being completely abandoned. We just understand that's where that person needs to go, that they need to be involved in their workplace, in their trade, just for example. So really the potential illumination of crisis situations through astrology is infinite. I mean, we're all under different pressures all the time. Astrology teaches us to face those with great clarity and courage. One of the things that I say in this recent book is that instead of thinking of some of the planets as malefics, planets like Mars, Uranus, Pluto, what have you, Saturn, certainly, instead of thinking of them as malefics, we can think of them as stressors and realize we're all facing different stressors. We're all having different Mars transits and having little stress points in our bodies, in our workplace, in our health. And they're stressors. So we have different ways we can cope with stress. And there are better and worse ways of coping with stress. So we adapt in the most intelligent ways to those life challenges under the guidance of astrology. I'm sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Oh, not at all. Just the word that you used there, stressors, and it made me think of the word stress in a different way, as in stressing something,
Mm,
and putting an emphasis,
emphasis.
highlight of something.
That's
And
good.
when we're thinking about crisis, it's an area of life that's being highlighted that needs attention. And it's perhaps been neglected, or perhaps it's been kind of in the back of our minds that we need to address it, but hey, we just haven't wanted to go there. And then comes that moment in which we have no choice but to engage. And I think it's that engagement with that is being demanded, because this is now being highlighted. And I think, you were also, there was something else that you said where you were talking about how we like everything to be stable. And then you said, oh, but not everybody, people, there are differences. And yet, I think that no matter how much, let's say, a Mercurial or Uranian nature thrives on variety, we all have an understanding of how the world works. And that perspective may well be the thing that's being challenged in a crisis. It's that perspective of the world and how it works. So for those who are more fluid in their structures and the way that they organize their lives, there is still this need to have a consistency in knowing that, well, gravity keeps us on the ground, and our feet touch the ground, etc. And then something happens that blindsides us. And doesn't it work like that? How does it actually work? And so it can come in many different ways, but always it's that emphasis on something that needs our attention. And that crisis moment is the opportunity for healing, as you've been illustrating.
Yes.
There's a quote that I've written down from your book, which made me smile, and I'm going to read it out, and then I think you're going to have to do a bit of explaining. I've become convinced that astrology can play an essential role in psychotherapy and can act as a potent antidepressant, possibly better than Prozac. I couldn't agree more, but I think this bears a bit of explanation.
Well, I first developed that concept in the book Planets in Therapy, where there's a chapter called Better Than Prozac, Astrology and Mental Health. And the idea is that we can understand the challenges of life and bear them emotionally and spiritually in the light of planetary symbolism in a way that we may not need to go on medication just because, there's some sadness or depressed mood. Take right now, Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces. It's, for many people, a time of some discouragement, disappointments, lethargy, lack of enthusiasm, loneliness. Saturn, Neptune in Pisces, that's the mood. That's part of the mood of the moment. It's not a pathology to feel some sorrowfulness, some anxiety, some some of those Piscean feelings, and we pass through it and we realize this is not forever. Or if you're going through some difficult Saturn transit to your natal chart and you are having to work really hard, and sometimes you think, well, where's the lightness of being? Where's the joy? But then you realize, well, but Saturn is trying to focus me. I'm trying to accomplish something, trying to build something, trying to persist in a pursuit. And so I don't feel so down. I don't feel so depressed. Astrology has immense potential benefits for our emotional well-being because we just move through different states, through different moods, constantly changing moon sign and moon phases, and we allow ourselves to go through these phases, these different experiences, and not stick to them, not cling to them, including not clinging to our depressed moods. And so I'm not negating the value of medications for those who need that, but I'm suggesting that astrology has an uplifting quality. And it's also quite humorous, really, when you start seeing the perfect tapestry we're woven into, day by day. And as we align with that, we feel freedom. We unfold ourselves and bring forth the best in ourselves so that we overcome the discouragement, the sadness, the depression. So, my mission as a therapist has been to develop holistic methodologies. In addition to astrology, I use dream analysis and yoga quite extensively, and astrology. These three methods, and then adding music and toning, different things like this, create a therapy that is catalytic, that is liberating, and gives people an alternative to antidepressant medications, which have the side effects that are sometimes undesirable, and withdrawal symptoms from those medications can be very difficult. So it's not really the time and place to go off on that topic, but astrology brings meaning to suffering. And so we feel okay. We're just going through it. We maintain equanimity, going through different changes, different challenges. And
it is important that we not medicalize normal human emotion and normal human experience. I was going through a Saturn transit, Saturn Square, I think to Mercury. And I found myself lying in the bath one day thinking, I feel as though all joy has been drained from me. And that's a very out of character statement, because I'm naturally of a cheerful disposition and I laugh easily and have many passions for doing lots of things. But in that moment, it felt as though no joy was left in me. And then I thought, oh yeah, Saturn Square Mercury.
Doing some serious thinking.
Yeah, and I think the very next day it was like the sun had come out and it felt better. Okay, the situation was the same, but I think what changed was the recognition of the depth of sorrow that I was experiencing and grief. And in that moment of recognition, I thought, oh, I've got to do something about this. and so that's where it then began to pivot. So this is absolutely I think maybe that's why when I read that part of your book, that statement, it made me smile because, yeah, absolutely. Just knowing that, I thought, oh, okay, yeah, well, Saturn is supposed to be realistic, but it never is. It's always pessimistic. Um, so although it we think in those moments that we're being very realistic, actually, no, being realistic means being able to look at the bright as well as the dark. It's
Well,
having
it's also about working towards goals with an understanding of the salience of what we're doing. Yeah, we're doing all this work, but it means something to me. Doing what I have to do sometimes is difficult, but it means something. Even if it's just to survive, it's just working to pay rent and put food on the table. That's meaningful. I need that.
and
And excuse me.
heroic.
Yeah. So we start to embrace and love our work. I mean, to me, that's an incredible gift of Saturn, is bringing that awareness as Saturn transits around the chart through different houses. I'm making different decisions. I'm focusing in certain areas, and it's necessary. A friend of mine has Saturn going through his eighth house. His wife decided to stop working to do something of a more charitable nature, something artistic, and something that doesn't bring in income. And so at first, he was resentful and thinking, she's not pulling her weight. Eighth house is shared resources. But then he realized, no, this is important. She wants to do this. I can handle it. I can take on an increased role in the marital finances, being the sole provider for a while. And so he feels great about it now. And the lessons we get in this way are endless. Just tracking Saturn around the chart and seeing how, yeah, for this period of time, I was really working on this, and hopefully there's a feeling of satisfaction in accomplishing things in different realms of life by sustaining effort and finding happiness in the work, meaningfulness, like it matters.
Absolutely. You talk about therapeutic astrology and you talk about process orientation.
Yeah.
Talk us through those two terms.
Well, the idea is many astrologers, when we are analyzing a chart and interpreting it, may make certain pronouncements. Pluto aspecting Venus means this. I know an astrologer who often says that when Pluto aspects Venus, it means you will be a widow. Something like very concrete, very specific. And the reality is, planetary symbols can unfold in so many ways. And what I like to do is walk around the symbol from many perspectives. It could mean this, it could mean this, it could mean this, and relate to the person, have a conversation about how they're experiencing that natal planet or that transiting planet, and experience the transit as a process, not as an event that is going to happen to me. And it's totally understandable that people starting out think the planets are doing things to me and that things are just going to happen. But in a psychological approach, we view the planets as a mirror of what's going on inside us, intrapsychic change and development over time. And so we adopt a process orientation, like what can I make of this transit? What can I do with it? How can I evolve through this transit or this progressed aspect? And so it's very satisfying to anticipate what's coming up and then to pass into that transit and evolve through it to not concretize the transit or the natal position and say that it only means one thing. So one of my main practices is combining astrology and meditation. In other words, to approach planetary symbols with a quiet mind, to contemplate. What's the intention of this? What does the universe want? What is supposed to happen? Or what is the highest potential of this? What could evolve from this? So we imagine the possibilities. This is called symbol amplification, and it's described in a book also published by Wessex astrologer called Astrology and Meditation. I think that's backwards on your screen, but
No, no.
the fearless contemplation of change. And so this attitude kind of infuses my work, just like we want to contemplate what is the universe trying to get to happen here. And it can be challenging to our egos at times. You know, it's not always what we want. So we have to learn to want what life wants and flow with it. Anyway, that's a little bit about the process orientation. I give a lot of examples of this, but one example that I cite is somebody with Mars, Uranus conjunct in the 7th house in Cancer, and somebody who constantly has change in her relationships and, you know, always breaking up, always attracting someone else, always breaking up, and then thinking, I'm doomed, I'll never have a relationship, I'm flawed, you know, having all of this internal judgment about it. And so in the process of working in some sessions over time, not just a one-time, you know, reading, we were able to come to some understanding of her need for independence, her need for distance, her discomfort with attachment. Mars, Uranus are in Cancer, the sign that represents attachment. And so she came to an understanding of why she was pushing away someone who was trying to be very close to her, and came to realize she could have a relationship and allow someone to need her, you know, intensely, Mars in Cancer in the 7th house, but also live separately, not have a traditional marriage. She didn't have to cohabitate with the person that she loves. So that's a process orientation to her chart, instead of saying, you know, your Mars is afflicted, it's in its fall in the sign of Cancer, you know. So this process orientation often throws out some of the traditional rules, because the idea is, yes, technically Mars is in its fall according to traditional rulership. Mars is exalted in Capricorn and fall in Cancer. But in a psychological point of view, that Mars in Cancer is very meaningful. It's not afflicted, it's not weak. It just needs to evolve within its own archetype, its own archetypal
Yeah, and I would
way.
say that, you know, having a Mars in that situation that is considered to be weak just shows that there's some work needing to be done here to bring understanding. And I think it's you're this seeing everything as a process is extremely valuable, because it is about engaging rather than having a feeling of being a victim of something and sinking in feelings of being overwhelmed, which we all have. We all have those experiences where we feel overwhelmed, where we feel that perhaps we have been unjustly treated. And very often, absolutely, that is the obvious interpretation of events. However, it's what we do with that and how we turn that around. And that is about engaging with the process and saying, okay, what am I going to take from this? What am I learning? how is this helping me to grow and develop? What is it that I need to do? So that we don't get stuck in that sinking feeling.
Sure.
That's the why this is so incredibly important and valuable.
Yes. You know, Neptune is the symbol of suffering. Of course, it's a symbol of spirituality and transcendence and has many meanings. But on one level, it brings us into the experience of some suffering. And yesterday, I was speaking to someone who has Neptune opposing Saturn in the fourth house. And it's a long transit. It's like a year and a half transit. And there's no way around the fact that it's a difficult family situation. There's a family member who is disabled, needs a lot of care. And there's not a way to sugarcoat that. That's just difficult to endure. And there are times when we have to pass through those seasons, but also to just say, I have to take responsibility for this. This is what life is handing me on a platter to work through as a yoga, as a spiritual path, as a dharma. And yet it also teaches us that everything changes. There's always another cycle. There's always another season, another phase, another experience. So nothing is permanent, including our suffering. So it's a very spiritually uplifting process to study astrology and to make some meaning, some sense out of all of this.
There are situations like that that have silver linings of bringing people closer together, and of there's something that's very enriching in that relationship that develops. And then there are other times when it feels like it's the opposite, because the dynamic is, one where the person who is dependent on the other doesn't like being dependent, and there's all this, but always there is something there that pushes us to grow. Always there's something there that pushes us to grow. And as you say, it's really important to engage with the feelings, but understand that, that old saying, this too shall pass.
Yes. And our birth chart is like a roadmap. It's perfect. It shows us where we need to go. And we've got to learn to read our map clearly with a clear mind, with realism, and with excitement and anticipation of what's possible.
So we're talking about growth, which makes us think about the way that we're evolving and developing. And you talk in your book about how the different planets can be seen from a developmental perspective.
Oh,
Talk through that.
well, I think all astrologers should take at least one class on life cycle, lifespan, human development, because there are predictable stages of the life cycle, and understanding astrology in the light of those stages is a fantastic framework for combining astrological symbolism and psychological theory. So, we know the Mars cycle, and we know that kids, go through their terrible twos right at their first Mars return. Oh, the birth of the will, the birth of assertiveness, the birth of autonomy, the birth of initiative. Beautiful, excellent. It has a purpose. And then at each phase of our subsequent Mars cycles, We're supposed to exercise that autonomy, that sense of initiative, that sense of drive throughout life. But if there's a major transit to Mars, maybe a transit of Neptune to Mars for some period of time, maybe that will to act is debilitated, is temporarily weakened or temporarily unfocused. So there's something, an issue to work with. Saturn is beautiful to understand in the light of developmental stages because its phases correspond to all of the pivotal stages identified by psychologists. So in school, early school years, ages 7 to 8, Erik Erikson says that's the age of developing industry versus a feeling of inferiority. What does industry mean? It means productivity, making good use of our time, following through, finishing things, completing an assignment, being able to focus our attention on something that we are asked to master in school years. Ages 14, 15, the opposition, and the whole topic of identity versus role confusion, beginning to sort out what are my priorities, what are the areas that are important to me, not what my parents or church tells me I must focus on, but Saturn opposite Saturn, I'm starting to identify some essential organizing objectives and interests. At 21, 22, launching into early adulthood in most Western cultures. It happens earlier in some places, but taking on self-sufficiency and what we call, launching in early adulthood, becoming one's own person in the world, and the age 30 transition correlating to the Saturn return, where we have to make formative choices and commitments that set the tone for our adult life for many years, and so forth and so on. Into the 30s, we call that the settling down period, where hopefully things are starting to coalesce into a life, with the unfolding of one's objectives and goals. So, and then the beautiful Uranus opposition, a beautiful transit. And I call it the transit of midlife individuation, where you make self-liberating choices and try to more fully unfold the totality of who you are. For me, I was a musician as a young person. And then for some years, I put music aside while I tried to figure out how to earn a livelihood. And then when I got to 40 to 42, I had to go out and start playing. I was playing in clubs, playing little bars, and just for fun, just for the freedom of expression, just to be in part of music. And that was immensely fantastic, and that continues. So anyway, instead of thinking of a Saturn transit as just some dreadful thing that happens to me that I've got to endure, this is the common complaint of beginning astrologers or people consulting astrologers. When will it be over? I'm just going to not do anything until this is over. Instead, we say, no, this is a developmental process. This is a task. And you could see Saturn's movement through the houses of the chart as a series of developmental tasks. Saturn going through the second house, figure out how to have some stable income, how to have some money that you need, or figure out how to allocate resources. In the fourth house, how to stabilize my housing, how to develop a nice home of whatever kind that I choose and am capable of having. In the fifth house, how do I want to unfold my creativity during this time frame, to express myself, to have some fun, have some joy? And in the sixth house, what necessary changes and adjustments in my lifestyle are required? Maybe I need to alter my diet a little bit, maybe change up my exercise or get a new health, team, different doctors, and in the seventh house, choosing my friends carefully, building and committing to certain interpersonal projects and relationships. In the eighth house, trying to navigate issues of trust as they pertain to sex, money, and power in interpersonal life. Or how do I straighten out my credit? Or, when Saturn was in my eighth house, I got my first mortgage. So taking on a loan, money received from others, it's a trust, it's an agreement. People say such terrible things about the eighth house, death. Yeah, sure, sometimes death happens, no doubt. But some alchemy can occur in the eighth house through the sharing of resources or the skillful use of loans and mortgages. So eighth house is wonderful. Anyhow, any of the Saturn's passage through these houses gives us a task, a series of challenges for 2 to 3 years. Saturn through the 11th house, the challenge of participation, membership, getting involved, linking up with others, attending meetings, conferences, being part of a field of interest. In this wonderful book called Alone with Others, the philosopher, I think his name is Stephen Batchelor, and he says the cure for loneliness is participation. Get involved, participate, and so forth and so on. So astrologers contemplate these changing phases as a series of tasks, things to focus on and master for a period of time, rather than just some miserable thing that happens to me that I must endure. That's the key. But then there are tasks of development not identified by psychologists. The Neptune transits bring a whole other set of developmental tasks that are more spiritual in nature. The test and task of faith, trust in the unknown, letting the unknown be. Angie Arian says one of the key addictions is the addiction to the need to know. I love that. So it's addiction to perfection, the addiction to intensity, which is a big problem these days with people being overstimulated by constant media immersion. And then there's the addiction to the need to know. I love that. So Neptune sometimes teaches us, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I trust, I let go, I allow. And that very perspective allows transcendence. You're above it. You're witnessing. You're a being experiencing change, but having a certain detachment because you're resting in what is timeless. So that is something that astrology contributes that psychologists don't know about. Pluto is such an amazing force. On the one hand, it represses, but on the other hand, it's the principle of de-repression, the emergence of what is dormant, what is latent, what is hidden. And so in terms of developmental tasks, sometimes it's to flush things out, to reveal, to expose, to uncover, or to dig deeper, to investigate. And it's a brilliant planet.
Yeah. My experience with Pluto, the trouble really begins when instead of allowing that energy to reveal, we attempt to suppress. And that doesn't go so well very often. that
Yeah.
So
the hard thing with Pluto is we encounter the shadow, we encounter bitterness, resentments, hostility. We encounter that in others. We encounter some mean person. We experience crime, violation, abuse of power, difficult things. And sometimes the task is to be tough enough to survive that, tough enough to encounter the negativity in others without feeding it with our own negativity, with our own hatred, with our own aggression. So that's a kind of a spiritual alchemical transformation beyond what most psychology theories address. So,
Absolutely.
my point in all these books is astrology and psychology enhance one another. They learn from one another. Astrologers can benefit from the facilitation skills of therapy, the process orientation, going deep into something, not just a superficial understanding, but dwelling in the process for a period of time until we understand it, we digest the experience and are nourished by it. And so astrologers benefit from those developmental maps of stages of life. And therapy is just immensely expanded by the introduction of planetary symbolism to illuminate what is going on. And what might seem disordered or unhealthy to one person, might be necessary. When I got out of college, I didn't go out and get a great job. I mean, I got a job in New York for a few months and saved some money. But then I went out and lived in a tent in the woods for better part of a year. And from the outside, it looked like I had lost it. But what was happening? Transiting Neptune was conjunct my natal Saturn. I needed that meltdown. I needed that time of uncertainty, that time of not knowing, that time of questing, aspiring, searching, and not committing to industrious activity. Sometimes that's necessary.
And
And
what we're talking about is amounts to honoring the experiences that we're having and seeing every moment as valuable, however painful or difficult it might be. So you have today reminded us of this very important fact, along with the beauty of astrology, its phases, and having that deeper understanding of the experience, of how it illuminates the experiences we're having. So thank you so much, Greg, for your time today.
Anna, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much.
And a reminder to everyone that the book we have been discussing is this one, Astrology as a Therapeutic Art. And I'll be putting a link to it in the description box. Greg, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Well, my email is gbogart7, numeral 7, at sbcglobal.net. And I have a website, which is www.dawnmountain.com. That's DAWN, dawnmountain.com. And that describes all my books and how to connect with me. And I really thank you for this opportunity to talk with you today.
Oh, it's a joy. And I'll be putting a link to your website, and also I'll make sure that your email is in the description box. Greg, thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're having a little bit of an unusual foray into the Bach flower remedies and astrology. Until then, goodbye.